Now, I know what you're probably thinking to yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, and this is borderline cute and adorable, but it's the fact that, well, you would argue that the only way or the reason why they would want to think about privatising the NHS is because, well, the Tories have done such damage to it that the only thing to worth doing is basically putting the final nail in the coffin, and by basically just saying, let's make it like the US. That's their response. That's their ideas of trying to fix an issue. So during the next 10 minutes or so, we're about to see exactly how bad the damage has been done. Oh, and by the way, for what they're worth, I have relatives and friends who work for the NHS, so when you're, again, it's their livelihoods as well that's been affected by this, and probably so many of the people that wholeheartedly rely on the NHS. And just to give one example of this, the Tories think it's a great idea to put toll booths, or you have to pay tickets just to park in NHS car parks. Now, I understand fine well is that, you know, it's a necessary evil. The money's got to come from somewhere. But what if you have to end up staying at a hospital for hours? And what happens even to, is this, and it's not even a thing that's exempt from the members of staff as well, because even some of them are getting fined. All you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is just do something slightly different, and somebody on a very bad day will suddenly decide they're entitled to give you a fine, despite all the work you do. Now, let's just get to the point, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go.
Hi guys, everything is worse under the Tories, but some things arguably matter more than others. The NHS used to be the gold standard, something that was the envy of the world, and it has sunk to a level where it's facing open criticism, and has for some time. Underfunding and the use of the private sector have decimated the health service, where more people are waiting and are waiting longer. And there's no ambiguity as to who is responsible. The Conservatives took over in 2010, and since then, with the exception of 2012 or 2013, things have got dramatically worse.
The picture is very stark. Let's go back to 2011, the first full year of the Conservative-led coalition. We'll compare 5 of the key NHS performance measures on this graph. Now, when something goes below the dotted line here, it means things are better than 2011. Anything above is worse. Twice as bad, 3 times, 5 times as bad, and so on. Now, one of our measures, people still on the elective care waiting list after 18 weeks, did see some improvement in the early 2010s. It went below the line. But by 2016, look, those improvements were wiped out, with a number of patients nearly 50% higher than 2011. What about other metrics? By 2016, the number of people waiting longer than a fortnight to see a cancer specialist had more than doubled. Since 2011, patients waiting 4 hours in A&E, 3.5 times higher. And people waiting 4 hours on a trolley for an emergency hospital bed, up, there you can see, 5-fold. And by the end of the decade, take a look at this, things were even worse. And then COVID struck. In 2020, some of these areas actually showed signs of improvement, but that was because people stayed away from the NHS thinking they were protecting it, even though health bosses wanted people to seek treatment. And here's what happened next. By 2023, 18-week waits for care were nearly 13 times worse. 4-hour A&E waits were 10 times worse than 2011. Cancer waits, a slight improvement you'll see in the last year, but still nearly 14 times worse than 2011. 4-hour trolley waits, nearly 16 times worse. Now, NHS England points out that a big driver in all this is the increased demand on the health service. Patient numbers are up, they need more care when they arrive, and there aren't enough beds in care homes to discharge people to. And all of these factors come together in one final revealing measure. Let's look at 12-hour waits on a trolley for a hospital bed, practically unheard of in the early 2010s. There were some months when literally no one in England's NHS waited that long. But in 2023, it was happening to 35,000 people a month on average. That's over 3,000 times worse than in 2011.
3,000 times worse.
It's a good thing, ladies and gentlemen, that I've not been sick during the entire COVID period. In fact, the last time I ever actually had to technically go to the RVI, the Royal Victoria Infirmary, was all the way back in 2016, and that was just to ask whether I wanted my metal plate removed or not, or did I just want to leave it screwed in. So that doesn't really count. That apart from that, then the other time was all the way back in 2011. But this, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, that's shocking. And bear in mind, this was even when we were this is when basically the pandemic was over. And it couldn't have been, and even in 2012, when the pandemic was technically still on, it was, I mean, just look at that though. How are you going to, that? And this is all under the same government, ladies and gentlemen, since they had the full year in charge in 2011. This is entirely their own work.
Then in 2011, after the first year of the Tory Liberal Democrat government coalition, the Tories are literally killing people. People are waiting so much longer for treatment, waiting so much longer on trolleys, waiting so much longer in general. Now, some of this can be down to Brexit. The ending of freedom of movement means that the NHS is relying more on fewer staff. The care sector is relying on fewer staff. But this isn't all down to Brexit, as we saw. A lot of it started from 2013 on. It's about the privatisation of the NHS. It's about cutting wages to doctors, nurses and carers. So if there are fewer available, it means there are fewer beds available, and it means people have to wait longer. This is the consequence of not investing enough in the NHS. Now, the Tories will respond by saying...
Well, I know, again, saying all about Brexit, but what was the big advertisement on that giant red bus about we'll be pumping back like 647 million or whatever it was back into the NHS? And, well, if that did happen, then, well, why are things like this? Why are things as bad as they are even down here and they weren't, below the dotted line? You tell me. It's because they had no interest in doing the things like that. It was a campaign. That's all it was. It wasn't anything to do with the actual NHS. It wasn't actually to do with the patients' rights. It was to do with, well, so we can end up in this situation. What that actually benefits anybody, I have no idea.
Saying, no, we have record investment in the NHS, but where is that money going? A lot of it is going to the private sector. And if you think about trusts, if you think about hospitals who have to rely on staff, if they can't get the staff locally, they have to rely on agency staff, and they have to pay a premium for that. And that's just staff. There's so many things that the NHS is paying more for, and they're not receiving sufficient funding. And this has to be the question that journalists ask politicians. Is it enough? Because when politicians reply and say we're spending 100 million here or 100 billion there, the question has to be, is it enough? And obviously it's not. So you need to do something different. You need to invest more. You need to remove the use of the private sector. You need to increase recruitment. You need to pay staff more. The big problem is staff are leaving because of paying conditions. And those staff who are left are overworked, burnt out, and they're considering leaving as well. We've heard so many stories about doctors and nurses going to Canada, going to Australia. Why? Because the working conditions and the pay are much better. So if you want a functioning healthcare system, you need to invest money. You need to make sure it has the staff necessary and that those workers are paid correctly and treated correctly. You need to increase this. You need to apply the same measures to the social care sector as well. Otherwise, things are just going to get dramatically worse. This graph demonstrates that the Tories need to be removed from power and they need to stay away from government for as long as possible. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Well, and again, I'll just leave you, ladies and gentlemen, with this demonstration of this graph right here. And I suppose the only thing I could safely add to this point, which it's probably been said already, but you've just got to think of, well, at what point do you reckon that the message is going to get across? Do you really think that I mean, if you are still convinced that the Tories are worth voting for, that they're going to change things, ladies and gentlemen, that they're going to make things better. They've had 14 years, ladies and gentlemen, to make things better. So you tell me, do you want 14 more years? Do you think they're going to make things better tomorrow? Or do you reckon by this time next year, and when the Tories are still in power, this will be into the 6,000 times, waiting for possibly nearly a whole day on a trot for a trolley? Well, I feel as though I feel a little bit trolleyed by what the government is doing. And again, if I was somebody who worked for the NHS at this moment, I would literally go to Canada, go to Australia, go to a place where you would not be put upon and overworked and overbed. Some people have literally been working through an entire pandemic just to keep people alive and keep people safe, and that's the thanks they get. And with all that being said and done, I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.